Beloved people, today we gather to remember and celebrate the life of a dear, dear person, John McCollum. This service is all about John. John's music, John's story, he has a big one. John's people. There is much to grieve, and there's much to be grateful for as well. And so we gather to shoulder this grief together. As we begin, I want to invite you to be aware of God's presence here. And as we do, may we find ourselves wrapped in the care of love. My hope is that in our pain, we may find some comfort. In our sorrow, hope. And in death, resurrection. So I'd like to begin with a prayer to ground us. So if you would, let us take a moment to find a posture of prayer. Holy God, gifter of life, companion in death, let your peace come and dwell among us. As we open our hearts to you, to grief, and to one another, may we have the courage to embrace what we need to feel or not feel, casting no judgment upon our souls. We honor all of the many different relationships with John who are here today. We remember especially that he was a spouse and a parent, a sibling and child, a friend and a neighbor. And I especially remember that he is a beloved of God. Through it all, may we support one another in word, action, and presence. And as we bear witness to John's life, may we see that his presence persists among us. May his spirit be an ongoing teacher, a source of wisdom for us. Amen.
Psalm 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
Into the Mystic by Van Morrison. We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Ere the bonny boat was won, and we sailed into the mystic. Hark now, hear the sailors cry, smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic. Yea, when the foghorns blow, I'll be coming home. Yea, when that foghorn blows, I want to hear it. I don't have to fear it. And I want to rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. Then, magnificently, we will float into the mystic. When that foghorn blows, you know I will be coming home. Yea, when that foghorn horn whistle blows, I gotta hear it, I don't have to fear it. And I wanna rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. And together we will float into the mystic.
In just a moment, family and friends will come up here to share stories about John. Before they do, let me invite you to reflect. How will you remember John? What stories have been coming to you since you heard about his passing? Right, this is important because when we remember, that's how we keep him close. That's how we keep him in our hearts, when we remember and share these stories. And so here's my story. I got to visit with John several times in the last few months, and these were bittersweet visits. They were difficult and bitter because John was declining. He was moving towards the end of his life. They were sweet. They were joyful moments because it was time with John. Whenever I came in, John would just gather me in. And in 3 visits, I think I was there for 5 hours total or something. It was just constant. He wouldn't let me go. He would share about all of John's things. I noticed 2 things. I noticed his deep, deep passion. And he has many of them. It's an eclectic and wide interest base. His passions are for music. They are for art and travel, for his gourd project. These interests, these passions showed me that he was looking for something. He was longing for further understanding. He was deeply reflecting on life, on love, on the world. John was wondering about it all. That's why so many of John's songs are like spiritual ballads, I think. Time with him was always deep and life-giving. It was like a breath of magic. And I noticed John's deep love for people, his deep love for you. And it's interesting how those passions seemed to strengthen or lead into this deepened love. There were times where he would be talking about a song and he would kind of look off and think, that reminds me of this person, this moment, this important value, this thing. He talked with pride about his family and his friends. He talked with pride about those who were old friends and new ones, those who were far and those who were near. I know he sought love and compassion, to be forgiving, to repair hurts, to be a good John. And that's why we grieve so much for him this day. And so, in our grief, I want to point to the words of Psalm 23 that Marie read for us, and I want to offer a blessing from it. It's a revered text in the Bible, and it's often seen as words for the dead, but I don't think that's right. I think it's the opposite. I think these are words for us, for the living. It tells us that even as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, God's love and care is with us. So, may our memories of John be like green pastures and still waters that we can find rest in. May the lessons that we have learned from John be like the rod and the staff that comforts and guides us. And may John's persistent love be like the goodness and mercy that shall follow us all of our days. And may God's love and care dwell with us, especially in this time. Amen. I want to invite Kelly to come and share about John.
I'll try to speak quickly and be brief, but I am a McCollum, so that may not be possible. I have a passionate love for Lubbock, Texas, that stems from a childhood of looking forward to seeing my cousins. And John was my favorite cousin. Sorry, other cousins. But he was. He was a gentle giant to me. I was the baby cousin, and he always paid attention to me. He had the sweetest, most compassionate face, coupled with a wicked sense of humor. I saw him a couple of times a year and heard about what he was up to through my parents. He and his dad, Mickey, stayed with us one summer, helping my dad build our first house. More than the amount of time spent together, it was just being family that bonded us. There's this feeling that you get when you're with family, especially someone that experienced your family as it was as you grew up, someone that was a child when you were a child. They knew all the family characters and their history. It's a sense of relaxing into your true self when you're with them. It's comfortable because that family member knows your whole self, your past experiences, and all the people that influenced you. On top of all of this knowledge, they will probably share a few family traits that undeniably tie the bond. It's fascinating to me, the family traits that are passed on. John had a distinctive McCollum laugh. He had my brother's wicked sense of humor. He had my dad's facial expressions. And if you knew John, these expressions were priceless, almost comical, and could tell you exactly what he was thinking. He was a great conversationalist. He was a good listener and an even better storyteller. He got great joy out of doing, working, and creating. A family trait I know he wanted to pass on to Molly. In true McCollum fashion, we loved placing wicked bets, usually for $1. Just this week, reading his obituary, I learned that enjoying sitting still is another trait we had in common. He held my childhood memories with me after I lost my brother. John was so good to me. Little did we know growing up together, but in separate towns, the strength of our family bond and the comfort it would give us whenever we were together. I will miss exchanging family history and stories with him over a cocktail. I hope to offer strength and comfort that only a family bond can do for Molly and Cheryl and Mackenzie and Andrew. I hope to be their family connection to John, just like John was for me. I can offer wicked laughter, sitting still, and lots of McCollum facial expressions.
My name is Steve Jones. Was a classmate of John's at Lubbock High School. That's been almost 50 years ago. When I met John in high school, I thought, this is a guy that I'd like to run around with and probably get in trouble with as well. He always had that laugh and that cat that ate the canary grin on his face when you saw him. Like, hey, I've got something planned that we can get into. In high school, John drove a big black and white Fleetwood Cadillac. It's what you call a land yacht. I think it was his parents' old car. He would gather people up, and we'd drive around the Loop. The Loop was new back then. It was 26 miles around that, so we had to fill up before we left, and we had to fill up when we got back to make sure he had gas to get to school. You know, he was on the golf team at Lubbock High as well, and I think that became the team bus for them because it could carry all the golf bags, the team members, the coolers, and anything else they needed to go on a golf trip. I found out I didn't know this because he probably didn't want me to know it. John had a nickname in high school that apparently embarrassed him so much that I didn't know you could embarrass John, but apparently this did. His face turned bright red, and his blonde hair did as well. It was given to by three girls in class, Mary Hall, Sabrina Capshaw, and Vicki Quinn. What they would do, they'd drive by John's house, and hoping that he'd be outside, they could check him out. And they decided to give him the name Johnny Angel. There was a song about Johnny Angel. So. Dan Poole called me this week, and he wanted me to share a story about John. He's a longtime friend of John's also. They entered a canyon race that they used to have, a raft race, Memorial Day, I believe. It was John, Dan, and Dan's future wife and some friends. They decided a week before this race that they needed to build this raft and enter this race. Well, they built it out of old pallets, some old inner tubes, and some styrofoam blocks. They got the raft to the race and into the water, and off they went, paddling away, joking and laughing in disbelief that the thing would even float. Towards the end of the race, they found themselves in first place, but there was a problem. The raft was starting to fall apart. So they had to bail out and wade across the finish line. It cost them first place. They ended up in third place. You know, I remember John would host things at his house and after his time out of the Navy and throughout his life. And I just remember that he was always a gracious host and always had fun and was always full of laughs and laughter. The last several years, a lot of us high school buddies that still live here in Lubbock, we'd gather for lunch. And John was always there, even through his illness. He didn't make it each time we met, except for the last couple of months that you could see that he was not able to make that. But he was always in a jovial mood, and he was always happy to see you, no matter how he was feeling. And you know that he was hurting and that he'd having some bad days. We valued our time together, John and all our friends, and we valued our friendship, and it was a blessing to be able to meet and reminisce with him. He was a good friend and a good man, and God truly did break the mold when he created John. I have this short little poem that I'd like to read. It's about friend. We're here to celebrate your life and the measure of its worth and every single life you touched while you were on this earth. We wish to pay our last respects. That's why we are all here. Thank you for your friendship and all the memories we hold dear. It's been a privilege to have known you. We were family, not just friends. And we will carry you in spirit until we meet up once again.
Good afternoon. My kids got a bet to see how long I'm going to last. So I got some money riding on this. My name is Craig Hall, and I'm the brother to Sherry. Though John was my brother-in-law, he was always quite simply my brother, because he's the only one I ever had. Today, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Hall family, a family that's 32 strong. Our family makes up my parents of 85 years old that are right here in the front row, made the trip from Indianapolis. My 4 sisters and I, 17 amazing kids, and 3 great grandkids. And of course, we are blessed to have John's children join our zany bunch with Mackenzie and Carson and Annabelle, and it was also John's son, Andrew. There is no doubt that John is here today. He even ordered us up a perfect Lubbock day. And I'm driving over here, and I'm like thinking of that Kansas song, Dust in the Wind, that he also loved. And I'm thinking about him just sitting here going, this is good, fine, Lubbock weather. and it brought a smile to my face, of course. This afternoon, and actually since this morning, can't look at my wife. I've been praying to God and John all day to give me the strength to stave off an intense emotions and grief breakdown in front of all you fine people and adequately capture what John meant to our entire family. So far, so good. Around the spring of 1995 is when Sherry met John at a social gathering. She didn't even know him. A friend said, hey, there's a social gathering at Tom Cannon's house, and I think you should go. And she's like, well, and it was a celebration of sorts for John, and she didn't even know, but she went anyway. And while she was there, she, saw John, for the first time in his element. And they didn't really say much to each other. At the end of the night, they exchanged introductions, and it was a little bit of small talk, and then off they went. And then just by unbelievable coincidence, if you will, there was another get-together at a friend of Cheryl's named Cheryl. And lo and behold, John McCollum's there. What a shocker. This guy, I think, might have been stalking my sister. I'm not sure, right? And they get together once again, and then this time the bridge started to form. Having amazing conversation that started this whole thing. And in true John fashion, knowing that he had the most eclectic taste in music, even on that night, the first real conversation with Sherry, he asked Sherry, hey, have you ever heard of Bravo Combo? There's this amazing polka band. And of course she hadn't. And as Sherry and I are sharing a week or so ago, we brought it up on Spotify and we're listening to it, and we both scratched our head why he thought this was good. So Sherry and John went out on their first date at the County Line restaurant, which no longer exists from what I understand. I believe it closed since then, but in August of 1995, they got together and had that first romantic date. And then after a few years, we were all blessed. 25 April 1998, just shy of 25 years to be introduced to John McCollum and to get to have it. As part of our lives. I always felt bad for John because our family is insane. We're a zany bunch of people that overtalk. Somebody said today, if you got something to say, just raise your hand and we will ignore you all night long. And John just got in with this motley crew of people that without a doubt are founded on agape love that our dad fostered from when we were young, about being open-minded, about parking our stuff at the door when we got together. And for years and years, we have just shown love to each other, and nobody was more of a beacon of that than John McCollum. Some of you may not have known this about John, but John had numerous aliases. I know, I didn't know this either until I started doing a lot of research. Sherry referred to him, her one true love, as Sweets and Honey. Molly called him Dad, Papa Bear. And recently, that I just found out, I had to type this in, $100. Because Molly would go up to him in his trying days, in the last month or so, and say, Dad, you look like $1 million. And he would always say, I don't know about that, maybe just $100. And so she would call him $100 as a term of affection. I referred to him as brother, or most times, what's up, brother? He was my only one, as I said. During his battle with scleroderma, I often referred to him as Texas Tough. I referred to him as the warrior. John was so tough on one occasion, they asked him if he wanted some anesthetic for this procedure, and in true John McCollum fashion, he declined it. And they did this procedure when we were all in awe of the strength of this man. The sisters and I affectionately also refer to him as John Boy, if anybody knows the Waltons show. Brother, and then we called him the outlaw. Not in-law, an outlaw, because he was from Texas and he had stolen the heart of my sister. Maylot, his niece, up here in the second row, referred to him as the Green Monster because she coined that name for him one summer when he would chase her around the pool, capture her, and throw her in repeatedly for hours. And Maylot always remembered that, and she capped it so lovingly. She said it was just endless laughter. Across the family, John was often referred to as the brown bear, right? Because he did. When he got his arms around you, it was like a bear hug that you've never, ever seen before. And he was also very loving and very protective. And periodically, you might be shocked by this, a tad bit grumpy. John was known for his sense of service, his love for humanity, and was filled with care and kindness. Had a heart as big as Texas. As Molly said, her dad was strong, resilient, wise, super caring, and always put himself behind others. And of course, referred to him constantly as Papa Bear. His love for Sherry, he was quoted as saying that meeting Sherry was the greatest moment of his life. Always supporting Sherry, her goals and her dreams without a single hesitancy or complaint. Agape love does exist in this world, and John McCollum was a perfect example of that. Love for his children, Molly, Mackenzie, and Andrew. He was honored to watch Molly from an infant all the way grow up to the beautiful woman she is today. Reconnecting with Mackenzie and Carson and Annabelle and Andrew to bring them into this world and be a part of this family. And it was such a blessing for him to have that reconnection. He was a protector of his family and always concerned and always forging contingency plans to ensure he was prepared for every what if. Had more gadgets and gizmos to ensure if anything went wrong, by gosh, he was going to freaking have an answer quickly and effectively. He was a patriot, had a love for country. After high school, he enlisted in the Navy, as I think you all know, and he served on the USS Arthur W. Radford for 4 years. He was a plank owner. Did I get that right? Plank owner. And as we're sitting around, what the heck's a plank owner? Well, when a ship gets commissioned for the very first time, those folks that are on that ship, that first time, are called plank owners, and John was that. We had an amazing connection because I had some military service as well, and John and I would often compare stories about the Navy, and the mighty Air Force, which was always fun. And we were both very, very proud veterans. He had unbridled curiosity and a constant thirst for knowledge, whether it's politics, books, music, documentaries, sports. I mean, I've never met anybody so well-rounded. I mean, he knew everything about everything. It was astounding. And he would always ask me stuff, and I didn't know anything. So he was always teaching every single one of us about what he came across and what he was thinking about, and he was always thinking about so much. He was an avid storyteller and never met a stranger. Anybody that ever came across John McCollum was going to meet John McCollum. He was open and honest, held integrity in high regard, and was just a true honorable man. He had a tremendous sense of humor, sometimes unintentionally, but he was funny. We had a lot of good times over the years. He loved his family in the midst of all the Hall family chaos. He always worked hard to carve out a moment that mattered, because a lot of times it was just chaos, and it was Christmas or it was Thanksgiving or whatever. John always went out of his way to either sneak off with somebody and just go have a beer at a quiet establishment just to catch up, or steal a corner and have a conversation. He didn't do just everyday surface conversations well. He really cared, and he really wanted to know who you were and how you were doing. And he only had that opportunity when we were together, most times just once a year. I'm not going to make my 7 minutes, Josh. Just like a McCollum, the halls are long-winded as well, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. John had many talents. He was an amazing chef. I call him the king of hospitality. Every single thing that he ever did in his life, he did it to as perfect as he could get it. He would make food, and he would always be asking us, we're from the Midwest, so we don't really know what spice is. He was always making sure that the spice level wasn't too much for us. He was always making sure when I showed up, because I'm a little connoisseur of Scotch bourbon and some beers, and he had always had this amazing array, and he was so proud and said, Craig, I have got something you got to see. And he was with that with every single one of us. Hospitality for sure. If you wanted something built, he would build it as an amazing carpenter. If you wanted something artistic, he turned this oasis of a backyard in Lubbock, Texas. It was just unbelievable every time you walked out there. As his health declined, he started getting into gourds and creating art, which if you haven't seen some on the table out there, they're out there on display. It's just amazing. Created this workshop. One of his things that he really, really wanted to do in his last days was to make sure that Sherry had a home office. And if you're coming over to the house today, you'll get to take a look at that. And it's just this most beautiful place. And this was like off on his checklist of things that he had to get done. And it's not shocking to anyone, he did. He wasn't going to rely or fall back on his scleroderma as a limitation. He found ways around it. If he was in his backyard, he found out that he could get a backpack, an O2 backpack, and strap that thing on his back and be out there doing chores, right? He was having trouble, going to the grocery store or carrying in, so he just, all right, well, I'm going to get this thing. He wasn't going to go, Sherry, I need you to go. No, I'm going to still go to the store, and I'm going to have this little wagon, and I'm going to load this wagon up and take it into the house. He wasn't going to hide behind scleroderma and stop living. One of my nephews referred to him as part hippie and part Texan. Part hippie and part Texan. I'll let you just ruminate on that. He loved Texas. Cool. He loved Texas, and he loved his Lubbock roots, and we always talked about getting our guns up, right? And when we took him to the mountains of Colorado, he was just like, wanted just nothing more than to get out of there. He was just like, he was literally claustrophobic and longed for the plains of West Texas. On the deck of his Navy ship, he's out there on the deck, and they're in the middle of the ocean. And he's out looking over the ocean and seeing the sun, and he says, man, being out in the ocean is just like being in Lubbock. You can see for miles and miles and miles. He loved it when the Red Raiders put a hurting on Big Brother Texas Longhorns. Nothing gave him more enjoyment than the Red Raiders beating the Longhorns in any sport. And we always talked about it on text because I was always following the Red Raiders after meeting him. He restored the Lubbock High School bell that I guess he had when he went to Lubbock High, and he was part of a committee to restore that, to bring back some great spirit, right, at Lubbock High School. He had an aversion to cold weather. Anytime in us halls, I don't know what we do, but we just love cold weather. And John used to, that brown bear part would be just madder than hell, pardon my French, in the house of the Lord. But he would be so upset about why in the world would we be out here on a train in the middle of winter going through a zoo. I mean, it makes no sense. He played games with all of our kids, ping pong, Risk. If you ever played that game, he was all about the rule book. And if anybody was doing anything illegal, he'd have that rule book out, making sure that nobody was forming any illegal alliance or doing anything wrong. And of course, he was a music lover. At one time, we got a hold of an old record player and a bunch of albums from a garage sale. I remember sitting in a basement in Indianapolis, just listening to old vinyl with John, having some bourbon, and just sitting there talking about music for hours and hours and hours. And the next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. He loved his family without a doubt, and kept that bond forever. He and I shared an I love you, man moment. We teased about it, I would tell him that I loved him, right? And he'd be like, knock that stuff off, Craig. And I would say, I'm going to hug you and knock that off, man. And I'd always tell Sherry, I say, hey, tell John I love him, whether he likes it or not. And I know he loved me. Last Thanksgiving, as he was declining, we took everybody and we got here. We jumped in a van and we drove from Los Angeles, where I live, and we drove all the way to Lubbock to see him, because we could sense what was coming. And John was doing exactly all the things I just described. He was in the kitchen cooking us this meal, and I know he didn't feel well, but he was out there doing that for us because he wanted us to have this amazing Thanksgiving. John and I and the family, we went to the Buddy Holly Museum. And at the Buddy Holly Museum, we were at the gift store. and there was this green Buddy Holly shirt in there. And Sherry comes out, and he's in his wheelchair, and I'm standing out there. And she's like, what do you think about this green shirt? And he said, oh, man, I really like that shirt. I was like, it's so funny. I was just looking at that shirt. And John says, well, let me buy you one, Craig. So how things transpired, we buy these shirts. We wear them that night. We would have never worn matching shirts ever or been caught dead. We even posed for a picture that I hold very dear. And we told each other that we love each other. And there was no ribbing or joking. It was just brother to brother. And I will never, ever forget that. One of the last texts I got from John was about a song that you're going to hear at the end of the day. And it's from Doug Smith. It's a piano piece called Passion. And just out of the blue, John texted me, and he's just like, I don't know if you've ever heard this song. I had forgotten about it. This guy's from Kermit, Texas. And Sherry and I saw him years and years ago. And he said, this is the song that I listen to in the late hours of the evening to provide me some peace. You're going to get to hear that today at the end of the service. And it was just a beautiful thing to see him, just envision him at peace each evening as he fell into slumber. In closing, with John's passing, we're left longing for one more conversation. One more smile. One more word of wisdom. One more, have you ever heard of? One more bear hug. To share one more beer, to share one more meal. To listen to and sometimes sing one more song. Life and time are the best two teachers. Life teaches us to make good use of our time. And time teaches us the value of life. As Shakespeare said, for those that love, time is eternal. I think we would all agree that John was love, and his soul is and forever will be eternal. He will be forever in our hearts and minds. And I'll just close by saying, I love you, man. Thank you all.
if we're able to manage it after that, you are invited to sing together. So from our black book in your hymnals, at the very end, number 2282, I'll Fly Away. I'd like to offer a closing prayer. Beloved God, with gratitude for all of the gifts that you have bestowed in the world through John, and the assurance that John's presence among us continues through our lives and our love, an acknowledgement that it always feels too soon to let go, and in faith that a loving God welcomes John with arms of mercy. We entrust him to your embrace. Receive John into your care, and may peace be his resting place. Amen. Friends, on behalf of Cheryl and the family, on behalf of Cheryl and the family, thank you so much for gathering. You are invited to the first of a night of receptions across the hall in the garden room. But first, receive this blessing. May you and all who knew and loved John go with peace. May the memories of John be your companion, and may those memories bring laughter and joy when your heart is heavy. May they bring us strength when the days are long. May they be a reminder of the gifts of life. May God uphold, encourage, and sustain you through all things. And may we go in peace. Hear this music.